Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Jos Harrison. I'm one of the careers consultants at the university's careers service. I'm linked to the law school, so I take a particular interest in the legal professions, which is why I'm talking to you this morning. Welcome along to this very first session in our Find Your Future fortnight. As you know, today is focusing on the legal sector, and this 15-minute session is designed as an introduction to set the scene for that. The session is being recorded, so it will be available later on both the Careers Service YouTube channel and I think our website. It's designed to be 15 minutes with 5 minutes for questions at the end. So please, if anything occurs to you as we're going along, please either pop it in the chat and I'll come to it at the end, or at the time at the end, feel free to unmute your mic and ask away. It would be lovely to have your questions. Okay, and so what are we going to cover this morning? Well, this is going to be a very, very brief overview of the main legal professions. I think very importantly in a session like this, there's going to be information on where to find further information and advice. And also, as I said, I'm happy to take your questions. All of today's sessions are very kindly sponsored by Newcastle law firm Hay & Kilner, and you'll have the opportunity to hear from them in one of the sessions that follows. Okay, as I said, this is going to be quite general, very brief. I'm not sure whether maybe some of you are law students and have some insight, or whether some of you may be first years coming to this for the first time. So, you know, I'm taking a kind of middle ground, but do bear in mind a bit about where to find further information and advice. Okay, so I'm going to start with some definitions. So, a lawyer. Now, there are many ways in which graduates can work in the legal sector, but what interests most people, the most well-known and probably the most numerous jobs, are working as a lawyer. It's a term lots of people use. What specifically are we talking about? Well, lawyer is a generic term for some professions, the first one being a barrister. And we have here a definition from the barrister's professional body of what a barrister does. So specialist legal advisors and courtroom advocates. They're independent, objective, and trained to advise the clients on the strengths and weaknesses of their case, etc., etc. As many of you will know, the other probably most numerous, if you like, side of the legal professions is solicitors. And here is a definition about what they do. These, let's not linger on them. You can look this up later, but they provide advice to clients. We'll look at the different ways in which they do that very briefly in a moment. When people talk about lawyers, they can also often refer to some of the jobs that I've listed underneath. Anybody on the call who's a scientist, that is being a patent attorney. A patent attorney, it's a branch of the law where you have to have sort of science and technology background. Because of the time today, and we're trying to cover a lot of ground, if you are interested and you would like a really good overview of the basics, so of all the things on that screen, then I warmly recommend to you the information you can find in that section of the Prospects website. That will give you a really, really good grounding for any further research for both barrister, solicitor, and any of those other jobs that you would like to look into listed there. I said that we would think about some of the key differences between the solicitor's profession and the barrister's profession. And there are some of them. So the first thing there I've listed are the approximate number of people working in both professions. As you can see, the solicitors is a relatively large profession. You know, in every small town, you are likely to find a firm of solicitors. In contrast, the bar is a much, much smaller profession, so concentrated to cities on the whole. And in part, this explains why the bar is notoriously very competitive to get into, because it is such a small profession. And everybody says that it's not going to grow anymore, it's not going to get any bigger. So entry is competitive for both, but especially so for the bar. At this point, I should point out that very many Newcastle graduates, both law graduates and non-law graduates, have been successful in both professions. So do bear that in mind. Solicitors, the majority of them are employed. They're employed by employers that we will go on and look at the moment. The vast majority of barristers are self-employed. So if they're no good at what they do, then there's nobody to pay them a salary at the end of the month, for example. So there is something there if you're at the point of deciding about how you feel about that. You know, there's a certain kind of mindset perhaps and a set of skills. The bar, a lot of people are attracted to it because they have that independence. So now traditionally it is seen that the solicitor's role is a lot more client-centered, so a lot more contact with the client and a lot more teamwork with other solicitors. And that is very, very true on the whole of the solicitor's profession. There is a lot of that. However, and in contrast, it's seen that the bar is that you have less client contact. Traditionally, when a client has wanted a barrister, they go through a solicitor to get it. So that relationship with the client might not be there. Also, barristers are very independent. They work by themselves a lot. And also, in contrast, the barristers are the ones that are seen to be in the court all the time. And for those interested in advocacy, so standing up and presenting an argument, the bar has traditionally been the ones to go for. I think it's really important, though, to be careful of making assumptions, because much would depend on kind of who your clients were and the type of work you did. So, for example, there are some barristers who, because of their type of practice, will never go into a court. In contrast, there are some solicitors, especially those who've gone on to train as solicitor advocates, who will be in court a lot. So be aware of some differences, but do your research to really understand the nuances. So let's move on and think a little bit about where solicitors work, because that can also have implications for the choices you might make. Now, the majority of solicitors work in private practice, in effect, for a law firm. So a business whose goal it is to provide legal advice to clients. Now, there are different types of law firms out there. They are not all the same. There are some kind of seen as elite law firms based in the City of London that will do an awful lot of commercial work. So if there is a big deal going on in the city, imagine one day Tesco's took over Sainsbury's, probably one of the Magic Circle would be doing the legal work behind that. We're talking about billions of pounds turnover, complex commercial work. There are high street firms where I would go if I wanted to buy a house, or if I got into trouble with the police or something like that. And firms in between, some of who will do a mixture of commercial work and work for private clients. And the reason I think it's important to think about this is that different things suit different personalities, their lifestyle issues involved. The Magic Circle, some of the larger London firms, some of the US firms pay some of the highest salaries out there. There is a reason that they pay those salaries, though, because you work very, very hard. You need to be able to put perhaps your life kind of second, certainly in the short term, to build your career. And then there are firms that are kind of somewhere in the middle. Now, the reason I have put some in green is because they are all very, very active graduate recruiters. So the firms that you'll be hearing from later today probably fall into those categories. There are options for graduates with the other firms there, but they're not as high profile. You kind of have to go looking for them. Another thing to say is that these categories are not set in stone. They're informal categories that people use, but it can be helpful to know about them if you're starting to think about, what are the law firms out there, what might suit you. And also they are kind of terms that sometimes people bandy around, so it's good to be aware of them. However, there are also solicitors working in other environments. So for example, the government has a legal department, so you will find solicitors throughout government, so in the business department, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, etc. Many, probably most large businesses will have an in-house legal team, not just businesses, organizations. The university has an in-house business team. Alternative business structures, which I won't go into today, but organizations, perhaps Deloitte, with a reputation for something else, accountancy and finance, have now started offering legal services. The Crown Prosecution Service, so the government's prosecutors if somebody commits a crime. Local government, so across the road from where I'm sitting in the Civic Centre, Newcastle City Council will have an in-house law department. Now, all of those will also take on trainee solicitors. Not in the numbers as the firms, but there will be opportunities. Solicitors can also work in community-based law centres and also the armed forces. However, they would not train you. You would have to arrive with them as a fully trained lawyer. Now, this is a very, very quick overview. There is a URL there where you can read more about the different types of law firms. And if you're new to this, or even if you're some way in, it is helpful to spend some time getting your head around this. Okay, moving swiftly on, we're going to talk about where barristers work. And as I've already mentioned, the vast majority of them are self-employed. So they're their own little businesses, if you like. They manage, the client pays them directly. They're little businesses. However, they work for practical purposes with groups of other barristers in what are called chambers. And to the outside world, they look like offices of barristers, but actually they're made up of self-employed people who share the office facilities, who share the administration staff, etc. A minority of barristers are employed, so in similar ways to the solicitor's profession, so the government legal profession, the Crown Prosecution Service, they will offer trainee positions to barristers. But as before, it's very rare to see them in the things I've put in brackets. The chambers, they are the major source, in fact, of training places for graduates who would like to be barristers. Okay, and again, that's a really good good quality information for getting your for understanding the context of all of this. Okay, so how to become a solicitor? Now, this information is applicable to you if you're on this call and you are a law student. So you're studying law at Newcastle University at the moment. Because you will have two options about how you become a solicitor. And you will have that option in theory for very many years to come, 2031. It's actually a little bit more complicated than that, but talk to me about that later. This is the route. So after your law degree, you would go on and do a typically 1-year legal practice course. This is where you get the practical skills to be a solicitor. You then join usually a law firm, that may be something like the Government Legal Service, and 2 years in that law firm where you were a trainee, you were supervised, you're trying different areas of law, At the end of those 2 years, you are a fully qualified solicitor. You might stay with the firm that you've trained with, or you might take what you've learned and go off somewhere else. Okay, so that is, and that route has been around for a very, very long time. It's, you know, if you're not a law student, you might be familiar with that if you've looked into law at all. We're going to move on now, though, and look at the new route. It's very, very new. It came in this autumn. So if you are a non-law student, you have to go through this route. If you are a current law student, you can choose to go through this route if you want to. Now, there are potentially all kinds of conversations about that, which we can talk about at a later date. Through this route, you have to have a degree in any subject. You have to pass a set of exams called the Solicitor's Qualifying Exam. When you have passed part 1, you then have to pass part 2, which is another more practical set of exams. And when I say sets of exams, we're talking about hours of exams. Before, however, you can be a fully qualified solicitor, at some point in the process, you have to have completed 2 years worth of qualifying work experience. Now, you can complete that at any time in the process. So you might complete it after your degree, you might complete it between SQE 1 and 2, you might do it after part 2. But you need to have that. And that can be completed in up to 4 different legal settings. So perhaps 4 different law firms would be typical. Now, there's a lot to say about this that we haven't really got time for today. What it is worth noting, though, under this route, the governing body said you had to do that course. The legal practice course was essential. You had to go off and do that. Under this route, as long as you pass these exams, it doesn't matter how you do it. You could sit in the attic with a textbook and then go and sit the exams. Nobody is recommending that. They cost thousands of pounds to take. But there will be courses that look very much like this that will get you ready for the SQE. Now, if you are paying for your own legal training, which the majority of people do, we'll come on to this, you can choose whether you want, if you're a law student, if you want to go through that route or that route. If you are being sponsored by a law firm, they are probably going to choose your route. If you're doing the SQE, they will choose how you go through this. And this next slide is an example of how a group of city firms, so big firms in the City of London, how they are going to organise it with the people they take on as trainees. So we haven't got time to linger on this, but I hope it gives you a bit of a flavour of how it might go. So this firm that provided this information is called Hogan Lovells. They're originally an American firm in the City of London, big commercial work. They will take on non-law graduates and they will send them off to do a kind of a conversion course, really. Law students wouldn't have to do that, but then whether you're a non-law student, graduate or a law graduate, they would put you through this preparation course for SQE1, you would sit it, then you would go on and get ready for SQE2, etc. When you have done all of that and you've passed it all, then they will give you the 2 years qualifying work experience with their law firm. Okay, so that is how one firm is doing it. Now, moving on, I'm keenly aware of time, how to become a barrister. So, if you are listening to this and you're studying not a law degree at the moment, your first step would be a law conversion course, where you would get the foundations of English law, much in the way law students get them on their degree. You would then go and do a bar course, typically 1 year. you would then go and do pupillage. And this is really the bar's name for a traineeship. So you would be with a barrister's chambers for 2 periods of 6 months. The first 6 months, you kind of watch, you learn. The second 6 months, they will let you go off into court. And when you've done that, your next step is you're fully qualified. You need to get what they call tenancy. And that is when one of those barristers' chambers, so there's kind of offices of self-employed barristers where they share all the facilities, where they say, you can come and join us, you can come and work with us. If you are a law student, so you're going to graduate with a law degree, you go straight from your law degree into the bar course. Okay, I hope that's all okay so far. Whatever type of lawyer you aspire to be, it's complex work you are doing. You need academic ability, and all recruiters will look at that. So sound A-levels or equivalent, as many A's and B's as possible. And then this is a kind of a good overview of the kind of skills and attributes you would need to provide evidence of. And there would be nuances depending on whether you were going for like a small law firm that campaigned for human rights, a big commercial firm in the city, or if you were a barrister, you know, the types of interpersonal skills, etc., would vary a lot. So it's, you know, it's useful, I think, to think about yourself in relation to all of these things at the moment. Now, a few other important things to talk about. First of all, for those of you who might be thinking about the solicitor's route, and this is that the larger law firms, and I've put plus because the government legal service and some other organisations may offer both law and non-law students who demonstrate the potential to be successful solicitors the following. So you can apply for vacation schemes, which is the Solicitors World term for work experience, formal internships in a structured way. If they think that you have really got the potential, then they will pay for you to go to law school. So that could be for any conversion course, SQE preparation, whatever it takes for you to get from your non-law degree to the fact where you're ready to join them as a trainee. And they will also, you know, guarantee that training place, which is traditionally known as a training contract. Now, that is the gold standard. Very many people aspire to do that. In reality, most solicitors have got there in a more circuitous route. So you'll see that little picture on the right. All the careers literature kind of explains that you will go through very smoothly. In reality, people might have to, you know, not get sponsorship immediately. They might have to pay for themselves. So there's a lot to think of around that. And where this is the approach by larger firms, they traditionally recruit people 2 years before they start work training in the firm. That's allowing time for law students to finish university and do the LPC, and for non-law students to do the conversion course and the SQE preparation. However, as I've touched on, there are a lot of exceptions to the above. For aspiring barristers, most chambers offer work experience, which in barrister world are called mini pupillages, and most chambers kind of mirror the larger law firms in that they would recruit people in advance, they would pay for the training that for people they think have got potential. There are also organisations of Inns of Court, called Inns of Court, who offer a lot of money to law students and non-law students interested in the bar. If you haven't heard of them before, I'd really recommend you use the links I shared earlier to find out about them. And again, there are a lot of exceptions to the above. It's very, very rare for even an academic superstar with a standout CV to go smoothly through the process. It can take several attempts to get pupillage, so the traineeship. So some things to be aware of there. I think most of the firms that you are hearing about for the rest of today are larger firms who will potentially offer what is bullet pointed under the solicitors. If you're interested in the bar, then the Bar Council will be there to answer your questions. So a few tips on finding further information and advice. If you possibly can, go along to as many of the panels that are happening today, but recordings will be available at a later date. You will, I'm sure, have your own questions, but I just thought some of the things I was thinking, what might I want to know? So it might be useful to ask firms about their approach to taking on trainee solicitors in the light of the new training system, which has just started. It's very, very new to everyone. Might be useful to ask about work experience and also about the routes their trainees have taken. So just some suggestions there. There are some really good specialist career guides out there for people at university interested in the legal professions. Here you have some of them and a few other points there. If anybody, this is recorded, but if anybody would like to get in touch with me afterwards, before I tell you about that, there is an hour webinar tomorrow for how to convert to law. So if you're a non-law student and would like to go to any of this in more detail, you can find it on the careers events page. This is how you contact the careers service. If you want to pick up on any of this, please do either in person or book an appointment online, whatever suits you best. Okay, I've gone through very quickly. I think I have gone over time. If anybody has got any questions now, please do unmute your microphones, ask away. However, if you're very keen to get to the next session, I completely understand if you need to disappear off. I would ask, however, before you disappear off, we have got a poll that my colleagues have asked just about today's session. So if you could take a moment to answer the poll, which I think I've just launched, I'd be hugely grateful. And feel free to ask questions as well. I should just check the chat. Maybe there are some questions. No, there are no questions in the chat. Anybody? Speak now or forever hold your peace. No? Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming. I hope you find it helpful. And yeah, do make the most of today and don't hesitate to get in touch if you'd like to take any of this forward at a later date. Okay, well, I will finish the session now. Thank you very much and goodbye.